What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in this episode, we are going back to figure out how we spent 12 years in school, 12 years, and only got to use about 20% of the stuff that was told to us from there. It's mental. We're also going to see how we can begin to boost those numbers up to like the high 80s. This is the learning episode. Let's get into it. Cue the intro. Okay, so before we get into breaking down what learning actually is, we have to agree on the fact that there is an opportunity to learn from anything. Every moment and experience, whether consciously or subconsciously, where you are receiving information through your senses is an opportunity to learn. Now, of course, this learning can either be for good or for bad. But either way, as long as there is information being received, there's a chance to learn. Now, our curiosity base is knowing that you can and will only learn from where you are looking to learn. So let's break down what curiosity is. To put it simply, curiosity is basically the desire to engage yourself in the process of fully learning the information you just received via your senses. For example, 5 people could be eating a bowl of soup, a very flavorful, very aromatic bowl of soup, and of those 5, not all of the 5 will be curious enough to ask the chef what spice is causing a particular flavor or a particular smell. A more relatable example would be a 10th grade science class. Let's say chemistry. So the entire class is in the lab. They're all going into the lab for some practical lessons, and whoever's teaching them does an experiment. You've got the beakers and all of that, and they're mixing all these chemicals together, and something turns from brick red to blue black. Even though the entire class has just witnessed, they've just seen this reaction, only the curious in the class will ask questions on how that happened, why that happened, what makes the reaction so violent, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason why I'm emphasizing on curiosity is for a couple of reasons. The first being, no one can make you curious. That's something that's inside you. No one can force you to be curious about a matter. However, they can try and coerce you and put you in situations where you are prompted to become curious about a thing. But when it comes down to it, your curiosity is on you. And the second one is you have to be curious enough about the thing to actually learn the thing. Another reason why curiosity is important for learning is ultimately nobody can force you to learn. Learning ultimately, with how we're going to break it down and explain it, you're going to see, is inherently on you. No one can force you to learn something. So it's on you to be curious enough about the things that you need to learn to actually learn them. So let's get down to the heart of it. Learning. Now, this is my definition or my understanding or what I've come to learn in my journey, what learning is. And so I've tried to break it down into 3 steps of the same process. That is knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Consider this. Before you learn anything, before you learned anything that you have currently come to know and is a part of your life, you could be considered like a baby in that particular thing. So let's look at the following analogies. We've all hopefully, been privileged enough to see a baby take their first steps or hear a baby say their first words, whether it's on YouTube, wherever. It doesn't matter where you've seen it. You could even go and like Google a baby saying its first words, all of that stuff. But my question to you is, at what point do you say that the baby has learned to walk? And at what point do you say that the baby has learned to talk? Now, if you said that we truly know that a baby has learned to talk or walk at the point that we finally hear them say their first words, or we finally see them take their first steps, by my understanding, you would be right. Although it would be the fullness of the process to get there as well. That, I believe, is the crux of learning. The heart of it is that's the full process. And so even as we break down the different parts, you're going to kind of see how it all feeds into the entire process of learning. Now, the first step, which is knowledge, is, I believe, one of the easiest but most dangerous steps of the process of learning. So it's pretty much just receiving information from wherever your senses find that information. So it could literally be seeing something, hearing it, smelling it, tasting it, touching it. Basic stuff. Your five senses is, I felt that slap, is I can smell my room, I can see my recording device recording me. Seeing it recording me. I digress. So basically it's getting this information into your system. Now this could be from one source, it could be from multiple sources. English. It could be from multiple sources. So for example, you could read a book, you would be looking at a book and you would be receiving information. On the flip side, you could be watching this video right now and you're hearing me and seeing me. So that's two sources of information. So it could be a combination of your senses, or you could only be using one sense. Either way, information is getting into your system. Step one. The next step is understanding, and usually I found this is where people begin to now differ. This is where people's individualities begin to step in. The step called understanding. Now this step is where you take that information and put it into your processing system. That system where you were receiving all the information for. This is where you now begin to integrate it into your system, the way you think, the way you process things. The step of understanding is basically taking that information and feeding it into the way you interact with information. Now, let me make this easy to understand. Is step one, which is the knowledge phase, is you receiving the information of seeing words. Step two, which is the understanding, is the process of you reading. So step one is seeing the words. Step two is reading. Based on how your system has become programmed, if you're English speaking, you look at the English combination of words, and by your understanding, you make words. That is what the second step is your understanding. Is your tongue might receive a sensation when you put salt on it, but your understanding is what's going to convert to the flavor that you've come to know as salty. Now here's where it gets kind of tricky, is each person's system has an optimized way of processing information in various forms, or rather from the different sources. So let's break it down like this. Ideally, everybody is taught to look at words and read them. However, that method of understanding is only optimized for certain people. And I say this to mean that certain other people would much quicker, that's not even a word, much faster grasp a concept or an idea or whatever's being conveyed in those words if they saw a picture of it or a diagram of it, or if they listened to someone explain it, or if it was a recipe, for example. If they tasted it and smelt it, they would understand the spices better than if they just read it off of a book. So, and I put this to anyone who is inside the practice of teaching, to diversify. Learn your students, learn how they understand, how they process life, and then channel the ideas, the concepts you're trying to get to them through those methods. I digress. I say all of this because it's critical for you to begin to investigate, to begin to discover how best you understand information. Do you understand easier from pictures? Do you understand easier from patterns? Do you understand easier from hearing? All of this because you learn faster and more efficiently, more easily, once you can get information and put it in the right systems, in the right forms. So for example, the person who learns a recipe better by tasting will spend more of their time actually tasting different dishes, thus learning more recipes for food. Of course, they would need other methods to figure out what's put in first, what's put in second, how is it mixed, all of that. But when you come down to the ingredients, from their taste, they can understand more what is inside it and what quantities, and see how they play together and all of that, in the same way that for certain people, to understand how the body works, they wouldn't need to read about it, they wouldn't need words. But if you could show them a diagram and say, your heart is here and the blood flows from here to here and here to here and here to here, the painting of that picture helps more with their understanding, even more so than they would receive from words. Now, of course, it would be best, most ideal, to be able to combine all these different forms. So you can taste the food and you can read and you can see the picture of the dish if it's a cooking. I don't know why I'm going into cooking, but yeah. If you can taste it, identify the ingredients, read about how it was put together, and see what it looks like, then you're able to master preparing that particular meal. Now, going back to the example about the baby walking and / talking, the last step, and this is a step that I believe a lot of people ignore, very sadly. They ignore in the process of learning and just take the first two, is putting into practice your thinking system. Is in that example, the baby could have received the information on walking ages ago. It could have been in their first month, or at whatever point that babies begin to see, is they've seen you walking. They're receiving the information, right? They're hearing you talking. They're receiving the information of sound coming in. Now, at a certain point, they begin to understand that these particular sets of sounds are used for communication, because where they hear you say something and the next person behaves in a certain way, whether they're responding with words as well or they're doing something. This is all observation. They're receiving all this information from birth. Or they're seeing you walk. They see you in one place and then after a few seconds they see you in the next place. It's like, oh, the vehicle to get from there to there is your legs. And they begin to observe how your legs work and all of that. All of this is happening and we're not even aware. We have no clue that this is happening. But the moment the child says, I don't know, mama, dada, then you can say that this entire process has happened. They received the information, they somehow have understood it, and they can put it into practice. Then the child has learned to talk or walk or whatever it is. In the same vein, for you to truly say that you have learned a particular thing, you have to go through the entire process. Is receive the information, understand it, and put it into practice. An example that hit me just as I was typing out the script is how everyone, like right now, just do it. Bear with me. And if you don't know what a step over is, I'm probably going to put a graphic here, but everyone has seen a step over done before. And everyone ideally understands how a step over works. It's one leg goes this way over the ball, and then the next leg goes over the ball, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. But you can't claim to know or have learned how to do a step over until you get a ball and do a step over. Shout out Cristiano Ronaldo. In the same vein, once you take everything you have come to know and further come to understand on a particular subject, once that's happened, once you collect all of that information and understanding and pour it into practice and actual doing and actual testing and actual trying, can you say you have reached the third step of what true learning actually is? And I've come to learn from my experience, if I can share, that it usually leads to the beginning of a new cycle of learning. Is once you've gotten to the point of practice, then you realize new information that builds on top of what you learned. And you then come to understand this new information and you put that into practice on top of what you were already practicing, and it breeds another cycle. And inside of that is where I believe we see the true adage or the true meaning of the adage that learning never stops. Is the moment you put something into practice, your understanding, your ideas, your perspectives into practice, it breeds new information. Your receptors are always on, you're always receiving new information. And so your process of learning is continuous. Now again, the second half of this episode is going up on the podcast. By the time you're watching this, the full episode of this podcast should be up on the podcast. I should put the links in the description box so you can head down there. If you're curious enough, you can head down there, click the link. I should be putting the Android and Apple links to the podcast. So yeah, you can head there and I'm gonna catch y'all on the pod.